You know that saying about never getting a second chance to make a first impression?
Yeah.
Well, today we're doing a deep dive into first impressions
Okay.
and like how to get better at reading people.
Interesting.
We're going to be looking at this video all about describing people,
Uh-huh.
like their appearance and personalities.
Cool.
And I think it's going to be super insightful.
Yeah, it's amazing how much your brain processes, like, in just a few seconds when you meet someone new.
Right.
You're basically hardwired to make these, like, snap judgments.
Hmm.
And it all happens subconsciously.
The video actually mentions this stat that it takes just 7 seconds
Wow.
to form an opinion about someone.
7 seconds?
Yeah, 7 seconds.
That's crazy.
That's barely enough time to even remember their name.
Right.
But our brains are already like making assumptions about them. Why do you think that is?
Well, evolutionarily, it makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
way back when, our ancestors needed to quickly assess whether someone was friend or foe, like a potential threat or, a potential ally.
Yeah.
And those split-second judgments could have been the difference between survival and, well, not survival.
So even though we're not facing life or death situations every time we meet someone new,
Right.
our brains are still operating on that same like ancient wiring.
Exactly. And those first impressions can be surprisingly powerful. Like, they can influence how we interact with someone, how much we trust them, even how we interpret their actions.
So what are the key elements then that contribute to this like 7-second verdict?
Sure.
The video breaks it down into 3 main categories.
Okay.
Facial expressions,
Uh-huh.
body language,
Yep.
and grooming.
Let's start with facial expressions then. I mean, it might seem obvious.
Sure.
But like a simple smile can instantly make you seem more approachable and trustworthy. Think about it. When you see someone smiling, you're more likely to approach them.
Yeah. I definitely feel more comfortable talking to someone who's smiling than someone who's like frowning.
Of course.
But I guess it's not always that simple, is it?
Right.
Sometimes people might be smiling, but their body language is telling a totally different story.
You're right. The video talks about how crossed arms, for example, can signal that someone is like defensive or closed off, or even if they're smiling.
Yeah.
It's about paying attention to those subtle inconsistencies between what someone's saying with their words and then what their body language is saying.
So it's like our subconscious is picking up on those mixed messages, even if we're not consciously aware of it.
Exactly.
And then there's the whole aspect of grooming and style, which I find super interesting.
Right.
What are your thoughts on how clothing choices factor into those first impressions?
Well, clothing can be a powerful form of nonverbal communication.
Okay.
It can convey everything from socioeconomic status to cultural background.
To personal values.
The video actually gives this really specific example that I love.
Oh, yeah.
It talks about how someone wearing like a vintage jacket might be signaling like a love for retro fashion or sense of individuality.
Right. It's like a little window into their personality.
Like instead of just seeing like jacket dad, we're seeing a story, a statement.
A whole set of potential associations.
Like cracking a code.
And the more we understand that code, the more insightful we become as observers.
Okay.
But describing someone's appearance goes beyond just listing off physical traits.
Right. Because anyone can say, they're tall with brown hair.
Exactly.
The video really emphasizes using more descriptive language. To like paint a picture in the listener's mind.
Right.
Do you have any favorite examples from the video that illustrate this?
I love the example of curly red hair that bounces with every step.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of just stating the color and texture, it evokes a sense of movement and energy.
Right. You can practically visualize the person like walking into a room with that bouncy red hair.
It's amazing how just a few well-chosen words can completely transform a description.
And it's not just about physical features either.
Yeah.
We can use that same technique to describe clothing and accessories.
Absolutely.
Remember that line from the video?
Yeah.
The delicate silver necklace she wears hints at her elegant taste.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great example of how just a simple detail can reveal something deeper about a person's personality or preferences.
It's like we're turning everyday observations into mini stories.
Absolutely.
But of course, appearance is only part of the puzzle.
Right.
How do we move beyond the surface and start to understand someone's personality?
That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
We've talked about how clothing can offer clues.
Right.
But to truly grasp someone's essence, we need to go deeper. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
The video really emphasizes using adjectives that go beyond the obvious. So instead of just saying, he's nice,
Right.
we might use words like adventurous,
Yeah.
witty,
Yeah.
or compassionate.
And what I appreciate is that it doesn't just stop at listing adjectives.
Right.
It encourages us to look for behavioral cues that support those personality traits.
Oh, yes. I remember that.
Yeah.
It uses the example of someone who listens intently during conversations as a sign of empathy.
Yeah.
It's much more powerful than simply stating that someone seems empathetic.
Exactly. It's about showing, not telling.
Okay.
It's about observing those subtle behaviors that reveal someone's true nature.
Okay, so we've got appearance, we've got personality.
Yeah.
But the video also brings up this crucial point about context.
Right.
It argues that how we describe someone can change depending on the situation.
Makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Like, how might our perception of someone shift if we meet them at a formal dinner party versus, say, a rock concert?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I think that's something we all need to consider.
Right.
Because context can completely reframe how someone comes across.
Think about it this way.
Okay.
Imagine someone who's very reserved and quiet at a large gathering.
Oh.
Now imagine that same person.
Yeah.
Surrounded by a small group of close friends. They might be cracking jokes, telling stories.
Yeah.
Radiating charisma.
That's such a good point.
Right.
It's not that their personality has changed, but the context has brought out different aspects of who they are.
Exactly.
So how do we account for these contextual nuances when we're trying to describe someone?
It requires a bit of detective work. You need to consider the setting, the people they're with, the overall vibe of the situation.
Okay.
And this is where cultural influences also come into play.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
What might be considered polite or appropriate behavior in one culture could be interpreted very differently in another.
Of course.
Like, for example, direct eye contact might be seen as a sign of respect in some cultures,
right?
While in others, it might be considered rude or aggressive.
Exactly.
Even simple things like personal space or physical touch can have different meanings across cultures.
It's like we're constantly navigating this complex web of social cues and cultural norms.
Wow. I'm starting to realize just how much goes into forming those first impressions.
It's a lot.
But all this observation is great. But how do we actually get better at it?
Yeah.
How do we hone those observation skills?
Well, you know what they say, practice makes perfect.
Right.
And thankfully, the video gives us some really practical exercises that we can start using right now.
I'm all about actionable advice.
Good.
What are some of the exercises that stood out to you?
One of the challenges is to describe a friend using just 3 adjectives.
Oh, wow.
It sounds simple, but it forces you to really distill their essence down to the most essential qualities.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like a mini personality profile.
Exactly.
And it's something we can do anywhere, anytime.
Yeah.
Just think of a friend and try to capture them in 3 words.
That's it.
It's a great way to flex those descriptive muscles.
Another great exercise is to observe strangers in public. Imagine you're a detective looking for clues about their personality, their background, their story. What can you infer from their appearance, their body language, their interactions with others?
Okay, I have to admit that sounds kind of fun.
Yeah.
It's like turning everyday life into a giant social experiment.
Exactly.
But before we all transform into Sherlock Holmes, let's take a moment to recap what we've learned so far.
Okay.
We talked about the power of first impressions and how they're formed in a matter of seconds.
Yep.
We explored how to describe both appearance and personality in a way that's both accurate and engaging, using vivid language, highlighting specific details, and incorporating those behavioral cues.
We also talked about the crucial role of context and cultural influences in shaping our perceptions.
Yeah.
It's not just about what we see, but also about understanding the factors that might be influencing our observations.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we have.
But there's one more critical piece to this puzzle
that
I think we need to address.
Yeah.
We focus a lot on outward traits, but what about the inner qualities that make someone truly unique?
That's a great question.
We can describe someone's clothes, their hairstyle, but how do we capture those intangible qualities that really define who they are? How do we describe someone's kindness, their humor, their resilience?
That's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
And it leads us to the next level of this deep dive.
Okay.
How do we move beyond those surface descriptions and delve into the depths of someone's inner world?
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
Sounds good.
It's like trying to describe the taste of a strawberry to someone who's never even tried one before.
Yeah.
You can use all the right words, like sweet, juicy,
tangy, but without that direct experience,
yeah,
it's hard to convey the full sensory experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do we go beyond those, like, surface descriptions and truly capture someone's inner essence? I think the key lies in a different kind of observation.
Okay.
It's about paying attention to the nuances of someone's behavior, their interactions with others, and how they react in different situations.
So instead of just noticing that someone is, like, laughing, we might pay attention to what makes them laugh.
Yeah.
How they laugh.
Yeah.
Or even, like, who they tend to laugh with.
Precisely, those seemingly small details can reveal so much about their sense of humor, their values, and even their worldview. It's like we're becoming emotional detectives.
Right.
Piecing together clues to understand someone's inner world.
Yeah. And just like any good detective.
Right.
We need to be open to different interpretations.
Okay.
What might seem like shyness at first glance could actually be thoughtfulness or a deep sense of empathy in another context.
Absolutely. And that's where the importance of context comes into play again.
Right.
We can't separate someone's inner qualities from their environment or the relationships they have.
Right. Someone who might be reserved in a large group could transform into a charismatic leader among close friends.
This is making me realize that describing people, both inside and out, it's like an ongoing process.
Absolutely.
It's not a one-time assessment,
right,
but rather a continuous journey of observation and understanding.
You hit the nail on the head.
Thanks.
It's a journey of discovery, not a destination.
Okay.
And the more we practice observing, listening, and empathizing, the more insightful and nuanced our descriptions will become.
Okay, so we've talked about observing subtle cues and considering context. But are there any other strategies we can use to capture those intangible traits in our descriptions?
One of the most powerful tools we have is storytelling. Instead of just listing adjectives, we can share anecdotes that illustrate those qualities in action.
Okay.
For example, instead of saying, "My friend is incredibly generous,"
Yeah.
we might share a story about a time when they went out of their way to help someone in need.
That's such a good point.
Right.
Stories have this power to transport us into someone else's experience.
Exactly.
And create a much deeper connection than words alone can achieve.
Absolutely.
Like, instead of telling someone that a piece of music is beautiful, we let them hear it for themselves.
Exactly. When we share stories that reveal someone's inner beauty, we paint a much more vivid picture for our listeners and deepen our own appreciation and understanding of that person.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
Yeah, it has.
I feel like I'm already starting to see the people around me differently.
Oh, yeah.
Like noticing subtle cues and details that I might have missed before.
That's great.
But before we wrap up,
I
want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about describing people being an ongoing process.
Right.
How can we keep refining those observations and descriptions? As we continue to learn and grow?
That's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
One of the most important things is to stay curious.
Okay.
Never assume you know everything about someone.
Right.
Even if you've known them for years. People are constantly changing and evolving, and there's always more to discover.
So even with people we think we know really well, we should approach each interaction with a sense of openness and wonder, like we're meeting them for the first time.
Precisely, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Genuine curiosity is one of the most powerful tools we have for building connections and fostering understanding. When we show a sincere interest in others, we encourage them to open up and share their unique perspectives, which in turn enriches our own understanding of the world.
It makes me think about all the times I've jumped to conclusions about someone. Based on superficial observations. I'm realizing now that there's so much more to discover. If we just take the time to look beyond the surface. And really engage with the richness and complexity of human nature.
It's a journey that requires patience. empathy, and a willingness to challenge our own assumptions.
Right.
But the rewards are immense. When we strive to see people for who they truly are, we open ourselves up to a world of beauty, connection, and endless possibility.
Okay, I am so ready to put all this into practice. I'm already thinking about all the ways I can use these skills to connect more deeply with the people in my life.
That's great.
But before we all embark on our own observation adventures, let's recap the key takeaways from this part of our deep dive.
We began by exploring how to move beyond those surface descriptions and gain a deeper understanding of someone's inner qualities. We talked about paying close attention to subtle cues, considering context, and harnessing the power of storytelling to reveal those intangible traits that make someone truly unique.
And we emphasized the importance of staying curious, asking questions, and approaching each interaction with a sense of openness and a willingness to learn.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really intriguing question that's been on my mind. We've spent all this time talking about how to describe other people. But what about ourselves?
Ooh, that's a great point. We've been focusing outward, but now it's time to turn that spotlight inward. How do we apply these same principles of observation and description to gain a deeper understanding of our own identities?
That's where we're headed next.
Okay.
Get ready for some deep introspection.
Oh, I'm excited.
Because we're about to embark on a journey of self-discovery.
Okay, so we've spent this whole deep dive becoming experts at observing and describing other people. But now it's time to turn that lens inward. How do we apply these same skills to understand ourselves better?
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Right.
We're so used to focusing on the external world. But shifting that focus inward can be incredibly revealing. It's like holding up a mirror to your own soul.
I love that, a soul mirror. But where do we even begin with that? It feels almost harder to describe ourselves than other people.
It's definitely a challenge. We often have these blind spots when it comes to ourselves. Or we might shy away from being completely honest. Even in our own thoughts.
That's so true. I might think I'm super patient. But my family would probably tell a very different story.
Exactly. That's why it's helpful to approach self-description with the same curiosity and open-mindedness that we'd use with someone we're just getting to know. Start by asking yourself those same questions that we talked about earlier. What are my physical traits? What are my go-to clothing choices? What do those things say about me?
And it's not just about appearance, though, right?
Of course not.
We also need to think about our personality traits, our values, our beliefs.
All the things that make us us.
Remember those descriptive adjectives we were talking about? Try applying those to yourself.
Good idea.
Are you adventurous or cautious? Introverted or extroverted? Creative or analytical?
It's making me realize that self-description is also an ongoing process.
It is.
Just like describing others. We're always changing and growing. So our understanding of ourselves should be evolving too.
You're right on.
Thanks.
It's not about creating some fixed definition of who you are. It's more about embracing that journey of self-discovery.
Exactly. And just describing others. Context plays a crucial role here too.
What do you mean by that?
Well, how you describe yourself might change depending on the situation. For example, you might emphasize different aspects of your personality when you're at work versus when you're hanging out with close friends.
That makes sense. We have all these different versions of ourselves that we kind of present depending on the role that we're playing.
Exactly.
But how do we reconcile those different versions into a cohesive sense of self? How do we find that common thread?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer. But I think the key is to be honest with yourself. About your strengths and weaknesses. Your passions and fears. All those complexities that make you uniquely you.
It's almost like we're piecing together this giant jigsaw puzzle of our own identity.
And just like with any puzzle, there might be some pieces that don't quite fit or some areas that are still blurry. But that's okay. It's all part of the process.
This has been such a mind-expanding deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I've gained so many new insights about how to observe and describe both others and myself.
That's great.
But as always,
Yeah.
I'm left with even more questions than I started with.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Curiosity is what keeps us exploring and evolving.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
okay,
what's one key takeaway you hope our listeners will carry with them?
I think the most important thing to remember is that observation is a superpower. Whether we're trying to understand others or ourselves, it all starts with paying attention, asking questions, and just being receptive to new perspectives.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
And I think it's important to add that self-description.
Yeah.
It's not about judgment or comparison.
Right.
It's about understanding, acceptance, and ultimately self-love.
Absolutely. Embracing who you are.
Yeah.
Flaws and all.
Right.
Is one of the most liberating and empowering things you can do.
On that note, we encourage all of you listening to continue this deep dive on your own.
Good idea.
Grab your soul mirror.
Yeah.
Ask those tough questions. And embrace the beautiful complexity of who you are.
Love it.
Until next time, keep observing.
Yeah.
Keep learning and keep growing. Hey, everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at how to describe people, their appearance and personality.
Yeah.
And we've got this video here. I'll cue it up and ready to go. But just the intro of this video blew my mind. It said that it only takes 7 seconds to make a first impression.
Yeah.
7 seconds. That's barely enough time to, tie my shoes or something like that.
It's incredible.
But apparently that's all it takes to form an opinion about somebody. It really makes you rethink that whole, don't judge a book by its cover thing.
Yeah. It really does highlight how quick our minds are to make judgments. Even subconsciously, and while we should strive to go beyond those initial impressions, there's no denying that they play a significant role in how we perceive and interact with others. What's fascinating here is that the video breaks down those first 7 seconds into specific elements we can actually pay attention to.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. The video mentions facial expressions, body language, and overall grooming and style as the big three. So facial expressions, kind of straightforward. Smile versus a frown tells you a lot.
Yeah.
But what about body language? I'm kind of curious to hear more about that.
Well, think of it like this. Our bodies are constantly communicating even when we're not saying a word. The video uses the classic example of open versus closed body language. Someone with open arms may be perceived as welcoming and approachable, while someone with crossed arms might seem more guarded or hesitant. Of course, context is always key. Maybe they're just cold.
Yeah.
But over time, these subtle cues can help us understand someone's overall demeanor.
That makes total sense. Our subconscious is sending out signals all the time. And then there's the whole grooming and style thing. I'm not saying you need to be a fashionista to understand people. But I do think the way someone presents themselves can be pretty revealing.
Absolutely. It's a form of self-expression, a way of telling the world who you are, or at least who you want to be seen as. Remember that example from the video, the person with the vintage jacket? That one detail could spark a whole conversation about their interests, maybe even lead to a discussion about shared passions. For a certain era or style, and finding those points of connection, those shared interests, that's often how deeper relationships begin.
So true. It's like a little window into someone's personality.
Yeah.
But let's say we actually want to describe someone's appearance. How do we do that in a way that's, interesting and memorable? The video breaks it down into physical traits, clothing choices, and accessories. And I'm thinking back to those specific examples, like that line about curly red hair that bounces with every step. It's so much more evocative than just saying she has red hair.
Exactly. It paints a picture in your mind, doesn't it? And that's the key. We're not just listing features. We're using descriptive language to bring those features to life. Even seemingly small details like that silver necklace mentioned in the video can add depth and intrigue to our descriptions. A delicate silver necklace might suggest a certain elegance or sentimental attachment. It's a starting point for curiosity.
It's amazing how much we can learn about someone just from those little details. But outward appearance is only part of the story, right? How do we move beyond the physical and start to understand someone's personality, their inner world?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. The video suggests using strong adjectives that go beyond the surface. Instead of saying someone is nice, maybe they're charismatic or witty, those words carry more weight. Give us a better sense of who that person really is.
And it's not just about adjectives, is it? It's also about observing how people behave. Are they a good listener? Do they make eye contact? Do they fidget a lot? These little actions can speak volumes about someone's personality.
Absolutely. The example that comes to mind is from the video where they describe someone. who listens intently during conversations. That simple observation suggests empathy, a willingness to truly engage with others. And then there's that great point about paying attention to someone's passions. Like, if someone lights up when they talk about photography, that tells you something about their creativity and how they see the world.
That's such a good point. It's like those passions become a bridge to a deeper understanding. Instead of making small talk about the weather, you can dive into a conversation about their latest photography project or what inspires them. It's a way to connect on a more authentic level. But one thing that struck me as really important is that the video emphasizes context.
Ah, yes, context. It's crucial for understanding why someone might behave the way they do. Someone might be all business at work, but completely different at a party, right?
It's really, I know I'm not exactly the life of the party on a Monday morning, but seriously, understanding those different facets of someone's personality, knowing that their behavior might shift depending on the environment or who they're with, that seems really important. It's like judging someone based on a single snapshot instead of watching the whole movie.
That's a great analogy. And speaking of movies, I think it's time we hit pause. On part 1 of our deep dives, we've covered a lot of ground already. But there's still so much more to explore.
Expert speaker.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm eager to continue exploring this fascinating topic of describing people. In the first part of our deep dive, we focused a lot on the what. The specific elements of appearance and personality we can observe.
Right.
But what really struck me is how this all connects to something much deeper, something the video touches on as well. The power of these skills to build genuine connections with the people around us.
That's so true. It's like all these tips and techniques are just tools,
Yeah.
right? The real magic happens when we use those tools to understand and connect with others on a more meaningful level.
Exactly when we take the time to truly observe someone, to go beyond surface judgments and try to understand their unique perspective. We're essentially saying, I see you and I value you. And that kind of validation, that feeling of being seen and heard, can be incredibly powerful.
It makes me think about how often we go through our days just skimming the surface of interactions. We're so caught up in our own thoughts and to-do lists that we miss those opportunities to really connect with the people around us. But when we make a conscious effort to be more observant, to really listen and engage, it's like a whole new world opens up.
It's like we're shifting from passive observation to active engagement, and that shift can make a huge difference in our relationships, both personal and professional. Imagine how much more fulfilling our interactions would be if we approached them with that mindset of curiosity and genuine interest.
I love that it's like turning everyday encounters into little adventures in human connection. But I have to admit, sometimes it feels a bit overwhelming. Like, where do I even start? The video gives us all these great tips, but putting them into practice in real life can be a challenge.
I think the key is to start small. You don't have to master all these techniques overnight. Choose one thing to focus on. Maybe it's paying closer attention to body language during your next meeting, or maybe it's challenging yourself to describe a friend, using 3 adjectives that go beyond the obvious. The more you practice, the more natural and intuitive it will become.
It's like any skill right practice makes perfect. But it also helps to have the right mindset. Thinking back to what we talked about earlier, that sense of curiosity. The more curious we are about others, the more likely we are to notice those little details that make them unique.
Curiosity is such a powerful force. It's what drives us to explore, to ask questions, to seek out new perspectives. And when we approach our interactions with that sense of curiosity, it's like we're turning everyday conversations into fascinating journeys of discovery.
It makes me think of those old detective shows, where they'd find a tiny clue, like a fingerprint or a stray hair, and suddenly the whole case would break open. It's like we're all detectives in a way, searching for those little clues that reveal the hidden depths of a person's character. And the more we uncover, the more fascinated we become.
That's a wonderful way to put it. And what's even more fascinating is how this process of observing and describing others can actually help us understand ourselves better too. As we pay attention to the qualities we admire or dislike in others, we're essentially holding up a mirror to our own values and beliefs.
That's so true. It's like we're constantly learning and growing, both through our interactions with others and through our own reflections on those interactions.
Exactly. It's a lifelong journey of exploration and connection. And the more we embrace that journey, the richer and more meaningful our lives become.
We've covered so much ground already, but there's one more aspect I want to circle back to. The idea that all of this whole process of observing and describing people can actually enhance our communication and strengthen our relationships. It's not just about being a good conversationalist, it's about connecting with others on a deeper level.
That's such an important point, and it ties back to what the video emphasizes as well. The practical application of these skills in our everyday lives. It's not enough to just understand these concepts. We need to put them into action. And the video offers some really creative exercises to help us do just that.
Those exercises were so fun. I love the one about describing your friends using only 3 adjectives. It really makes you think about what truly captures the essence of a person. And then there's the one about observing strangers in public. I know that might sound a little creepy, but it's actually a fantastic way to practice your observation skills without the pressure of direct interaction.
It's like turning everyday life into a people-watching masterclass. You can be sitting at a coffee shop waiting for a train, and suddenly you're surrounded by these fascinating mini mysteries. Who are these people? Where are they going? What are their stories?
It reminds me of that quote by Paul Auster. The world is full of stories, and if you listen closely, you can hear them all. And that's what I love about this whole idea of describing people. It's like we're tuning into those stories, those hidden narratives that connect us all.
Beautifully said. And there's one more exercise the video mentions that I think is especially powerful. Joining a local storytelling group.
Ooh, that's a great one. Storytelling is such a fundamental part of human connection. It's how we share our experiences, our perspectives, our hopes and fears. And by listening to others' stories, we gain a deeper understanding of the world and the people in it.
And what's really exciting is that as we become more adept at observing and describing people, we naturally become better storytellers ourselves. We have a richer palette of details to draw from, and we're more attuned to the nuances of human behavior and emotion.
So it's like this beautiful cycle, right? Observation fuels storytelling, and storytelling deepens our understanding of ourselves and others. And the more we engage in this cycle, the more connected and compassionate we become.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And it makes me think about something else the video touched on. The idea that all these skills we've been discussing, they're not just about personal growth, they're about making the world a better place.
That's such a powerful thought. It's like we're taking all these individual acts of observation, connection, and understanding, and weaving them together into a tapestry of empathy and compassion that can spread outward and touch countless lives. But before we get too carried away with saving the world, I think it's time for a quick intermission.
Sounds like a plan. We'll be back soon with the final part of our deep dive where we'll explore some final takeaways and leave you with some thought-provoking questions to ponder.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive. This deep dive has been quite the journey, hasn't it?
It has.
We've gone from those split-second first impressions to, the nuances of describing someone's personality. We even touched on the power of storytelling. I'm feeling inspired, but also a little overwhelmed by all this new information.
I hear you. It's like we've opened this treasure chest of insights, and now we're trying to figure out how to sort through all the gems. But that feeling of being a little overwhelmed, I think that's a good thing. It means we're engaging with these ideas, letting them challenge our assumptions and expand our perspectives.
That's a great way to look at it. And speaking of challenges, there's one more aspect of this whole describing people thing that I want to explore, the idea of being respectful and avoiding judgments. It's all fun and games until someone feels labeled or misunderstood, right?
That's such a crucial point. It's like we've been given these powerful tools. But with great power comes great responsibility, as they say. We need to wield these tools with care and always remember that our goal is to understand and appreciate others, not to categorize and put them in boxes.
It's less about labeling and more about appreciating the complexities of each individual.
Exactly. Each person is a universe unto themselves, full of experiences, beliefs, and motivations that we can't possibly fully grasp. Our descriptions, no matter how insightful, are always just glimpses into that universe, and we need to approach those glimpses with humility and an open mind.
That makes me think about the language we use. Words have so much power, and it's easy to fall into the trap of using terms that even unintentionally carry judgment or bias. Like instead of saying someone is shy, maybe we could say they're reserved or thoughtful. It's a subtle shift, but it can make a big difference in how we perceive that person.
It's like we're choosing to highlight different facets of their personality, and that choice, that awareness of the language we use, is a big part of being respectful and avoiding harmful stereotypes.
And I think it's important to remember that our own perspectives are always going to color our observations. We all have our own biases and experiences that shape how we see the world.
That's where self-awareness comes in. The more we understand our own biases, the better equipped we are to recognize them in our observations and strive for a more balanced perspective. It's not about pretending to be completely objective. That's impossible. It's about acknowledging our own subjectivity and using that awareness to approach others with more empathy and understanding.
Wow, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
Yeah.
We talked about the importance of observation, the power of descriptive language, the role of context, and even the ethical considerations of describing people. It's like we've taken a crash course in understanding human nature.
And what's amazing is that this is just the beginning. The more we practice these skills, the more we engage with the world and the people around us, the deeper our understanding will become. It's a lifelong journey of exploration and connection.
I love that. And what really excites me is the idea that by honing these skills, we're not just enriching our own lives, we're also contributing to a more understanding and compassionate world.
That's the beauty of it all, isn't it? These seemingly small acts of observation, description, and connection, they have the power to ripple outward and create positive change on a much larger scale.
So to wrap up this incredible deep dive, I want to leave you all with a challenge now that you have all these tools. What's one small change you can make today to be more observant and connect more meaningfully with the people around you? Go out there, be curious, and be amazed by the stories that unfold.